It is 3 a.m. in New York, 8 in The Hague, and 4 on a Wednesday afternoon here in Seoul. I'm Moon Gun-young. This is Arirang, Korea's only global network. Now, for the first time in 6 years, the leaders of South Korea, the U.S. and Japan met to strengthen policy coordination, especially on North Korea, on the sidelines of the Nuclear Security Summit in The Hague. It was also the first time President Park sat down for talks with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Arirang News' Choi Sun is traveling with the president, and she filed us this report.
The leaders of South Korea, the U.S. and Japan pledged to strengthen their cooperation in curbing North Korea's nuclear ambitions.
영내 평화와 안정에 가장 위협이 되고 있는 이 북핵 문제는 한미일 3국을 포함한 국제사회의 단합된 대응이 매우 중요하다고 생각합니다.
Reaffirming that they will not engage in talks with the North unless it shows sincerity about giving up nuclear arms. The three leaders agreed that their chief envoys to the six-nation talks aimed at denuclearizing the North will meet in the near future. President Obama stressed that trilateral cooperation has become ever more crucial in deterring North Korea's nuclear and missile development.
And our trilateral cooperation has sent a strong signal to Pyongyang that its provocations and threats will be met with a unified response, and that a nuclear North Korea is unacceptable.
The Washington-led summit has garnered much attention, especially since it was the first between President Park and their Japanese counterpart amid strained ties between the two key Asian allies of the U.S. over historical and territorial issues. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who has repeatedly expressed his wishes to meet President Park despite tensions over his government's denial of some past wrongdoings, seemed to have prepared a lot for Tuesday's meeting.
박근혜 대통령님을 만나서 반갑습니다.
As expected, the most contentious issues, such as Japan's denials of its colonial-era atrocities and its claims to Korea-controlled Dokdo Island, were not brought up Tuesday. President Park is now in Berlin for the first leg of her state visit. Here, she will hold summit talks with German Chancellor Angela Merkel and President Joachim Gauck to discuss strengthening bilateral ties and to seek German support for a reunification policy. Choi Sun, Arirang News, Berlin.
And as just mentioned, the trilateral summit was President Park's first official opportunity to sit down face-to-face with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Now, however, experts say the meeting will do little to mend the two countries' frosty relations. Arirang News Foreign Affairs correspondent Hwang Sang-hee reports.
Will Korea-Japan relations take a turn for the better following Tuesday's meeting between President Park Geun-hye and Prime Minister Shinzo Abe? Their trilateral summit with U.S. President Barack Obama on the sidelines of the Nuclear Security Summit in The Hague was the first official meeting between the two leaders. President Park had refused to meet with Abe until he pledged to uphold Japan's 1993 apology issued to the victims of its wartime sexual enslavement. But most experts say the trilateral meeting will do little to mend strained Korea-Japan relations. This, as many believe that Tokyo's recent change in attitude lacks sincerity and has more to do with pressure out of Washington to improve its bilateral ties with Seoul.
Japan tends to behave depending on the circumstances and reveal its real stance again when the situation improves. It's a vicious cycle for Korea-Japan relations that rotates from a temporary mending of relations to a worsening of ties.
Japan's sincerity was put into question following a comment made by one of Abe's close aides last weekend. Just days after the Japanese leader promised to honor the 1993 apology, his special advisor, Koichi Hagiuda, raised the possibility of issuing a new statement over the so-called comfort women issue. He said Tokyo should consider issuing a new political statement if fresh findings emerge while the government verifies how the apology was prepared. Experts say such contradictory actions will only push the two neighbors further apart.
Just as the Japanese government is investigating its 1993 apology despite its pledge to uphold it ahead of the trilateral meeting, a Korea-Japan summit is not a likely possibility anytime soon unless there is a fundamental change in Tokyo's stance.
Besides, there are more occasions lined up in April that could stir up the current diplomatic feud, including an annual Spring Festival during which Abe may visit the controversial Yasukuni War Shrine again, just as he did in December. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
South Korea is marking a sober anniversary on this Wednesday. On March 26, 2010, 46 South Koreans lost their lives in the sinking of the warship Chunan. Arirang News national defense correspondent Kim Hyun-bin reports on a memorial ceremony from Daejeon.
4 years ago this Wednesday, the South Korean warship Chunan was sunk in a torpedo attack blamed on North Korea. To remember the 46 South Korean sailors who lost their lives that day, a memorial ceremony was held at Daejeon National Cemetery on Wednesday morning. Thousands of people, including families of the victims and high-ranking government officials, were in attendance. President Park Geun-hye wasn't able to attend the event, as she's currently in Europe, but did send a special statement.
To achieve reunification, we need a strong military. If there are future provocations from the north, our military should retaliate strongly.
Prime Minister Chung Hong-won also emphasized the importance of national security in light of Pyongyang making continuous threats. He also called on the North to stop its provocative acts.
North Korea recently launched missiles on 7 different occasions, escalating tensions on the Korean peninsula. North Korea must stop its provocations and cooperate with the international community.
The memorial ceremony is not just a time to remember those brave souls who so tragically lost their lives. It's also a solemn reminder that South Korea needs to maintain the utmost readiness against future provocations from the North. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News, Daejeon.
So 4 years ago today, North Korea torpedoed South Korea's warship Chunan, and 4 years later, North Korea has fired off 2 mid-range missiles earlier in the early hours. Now, these 2 had a much longer range than any of the other Pyongyang has fired over the past few weeks. South Korea's defense ministry says the launch is in clear violation of UN resolutions, and Washington has joined in on that. Our Yulian has the details.
2 mid-range ballistic rockets flew 650 kilometers from an area north of Pyongyang towards Japan before splashing into the East Sea early Wednesday morning. North Korea has been firing missiles into its eastern waters with regularity over the past 2 months, but this one was identified by South Korea's defense ministry as a Nodong missile, which represents a change. They have a maximum range of 1,300 kilometers, which means they can reach not just South Korea, but Japan as well. Given the more dangerous nature of the missiles, the defense ministry held an unusually early press briefing Wednesday morning to strongly condemn the move.
North Korea's ballistic missile launch is an outright violation of UN resolutions, and it's an act of provocation against South Korea and the international community.
The launch of the Nodong missiles is the first in nearly 5 years and took place at around 2:30 a.m. Korea time, a matter of hours after the leaders of South Korea, the United States, and Japan met to discuss North Korea's nuclear issues on the sidelines of the Nuclear Security Summit in The Hague. The 3 had promised for a more united front against threats posed by North Korea's nuclear program, and the launch is being seen as an apparent protest against growing calls in the international community for the state's denuclearization. The launch also falls on the 4th anniversary of the sinking of a South Korean warship that left 46 dead. While Seoul blames the attack on North Korea, Pyongyang denies the charge. The North has launched a series of shorter-range rocket launches over the past 2 months, which were seen as an act of defiance against the annual joint military drills between South Korea and the United States. Yulian, Arirang News.
Now moving on to domestic politics, a new political party is born today. Lawmakers An Chol-soo and Kim Han-gil, who will co-head the so-called New Politics Alliance for Democracy, made it official earlier today. Our Connie Kim reports.
The New Politics Alliance for Democracy officially launched Wednesday afternoon in a ceremony at Olympic Stadium in Seoul. The new party will be co-headed by Democratic leader Kim Han-gil and An Chol-soo of the New Political Vision Party. Kim and An will jointly lead the party for 1 year until it elects a party chairman and leadership next year. The alliance adopted its platforms at the ceremony based on 4 main pillars: forming a just society, achieving social integration, creating a prosperous economy, and maintaining peace in the country. In an apparent move to garner more support ahead of the upcoming June elections, the platforms show neutral policy orientations that aim to appeal more to the country's middle-class voters. The alliance means the new United Opposition Party will have 130 seats at the National Assembly. The ruling Saenuri Party currently has 156 seats in the parliament. Saenuri representatives are criticizing the launch of the new party, saying it's merely a move to pursue short-term political gains, not to serve the livelihoods of the people. Political insiders say more challenges lie ahead for the new party, such as resolving conflicts between the leader of the Democratic Party and the New Political Vision Party. Kim Han-gil and An Chol-soo announced their plans to form the new party earlier this month, with an ultimate goal of achieving a transfer of power in the presidential elections in 2017. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now moving on to the nation's economic front, the Korean economy grew 3% last year, accelerating from an earlier estimate of 2.8%. Now Korea's per capita gross national income also stood at over $26,000, up more than 6% from 2012. But as our Hwang Ji-hye reports, it may not all be good news.
Korea's central bank said Wednesday that the nation's economy expanded 3% in 2013 from a year earlier. That is faster than the bank's earlier estimate of 2.8%. The Bank of Korea said robust exports and a steady rise in consumer spending drove the higher than estimate performance despite sluggish facilities investment. Last year's economic growth also outpaced the 2.3% recorded in 2012. The upward revision comes with a caveat, however, as the nation's central bank recently adopted new international standards on calculating gross domestic product. Under the new standards, the bank changed the base year to 2010 from 2005 and included contributions from new sectors like research and development to the nation's gross domestic product. Korea's gross national income, a gauge of the people's purchasing power, also rose 4% in 2013 from the previous year. The per capita GNI stood at over $26,000 last year, up from around $24,000 in 2012. Korea's gross savings rate finished at around 34% last year, up 0.2 percentage points from the previous year. The nation's gross investment rate, however, dropped 2 percentage points to slightly less than 29%. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
A growing number of Korean households are finding it harder and harder to keep their heads above water. According to a report by the Korea Housing Institute, nearly 2.5% or 2.5 million households consider themselves house poor in 2013, up more than 7% from a year earlier. Now, house poor is a term to describe people who are in financial trouble due to high mortgage payments. An official from the institute said that people tend to regard themselves house poor when their ratio of debt payments to disposable income exceeds 20%. To reduce the growing burden on households, the official suggested measures were needed to lower interest rates. Meanwhile, Apple has scored another small victory in its ongoing global legal battle with Samsung. A Tokyo District Court judge ruled Tuesday that Apple's iPhone 4 and iPad 2 models did not infringe on Samsung patents related to the secure delivery of data to communication stations. Now, after the ruling, Samsung said it was disappointed and that it's mulling over an appeal. Apple had no immediate comment. It is the most recent in a long line of patent trials between the two smartphone giants, and the next is slated for March 31st in the U.S. state of California. Now, on a much more cultural note, the first female chief conductor of a Korean public orchestra will lead her very first regular performance this week. Song Si-yeon took the reins of the Gyeonggi Philharmonic Orchestra earlier this year, and Arirang News cultural correspondent Park Ji-won went down to meet her.
The Gyeonggi Philharmonic Orchestra is busy rehearsing for its first regular concert this year, where they will perform Mahler's Symphony No. 2, Resurrection. The orchestra is receiving an unusual amount of media attention these days because of its music director, Song Si-yeon. When she was appointed to the position earlier this year, she became Korea's first ever female chief conductor in charge of leading a public orchestra. Blazing trails is nothing new for Song. In 2006, she became the first woman ever to win the prestigious Sir George Shorty International Conductors Competition in Germany. She followed that honor up the next year by winning the Gustav Mahler conducting competition and has worked as the first woman assistant conductor at the Boston Symphony in the United States. She was also the assistant conductor at the Seoul Philharmonic Orchestra up until last year. The 38-year-old is well known on the international music scene for her ability to balance orchestral sound. She explains why she chose Mahler's Symphony No. 2 Resurrection as the Gyeonggi Philharmonic Orchestra's first regular concert of 2014.
The Mahler Symphony is majestic and magnificent in its character, and it demands a lot of practice. I wanted to show that the Philharmonic is entering a new phase and show the audience our new determination.
The Gyeonggi Philharmonic Orchestra was founded in 1997 and is full of youthful energy. The average age of its members stands at just 34.
During my 2 years as music director, improving the overall sound of the orchestra is my first priority. I also hope to present good performances by the Gyeonggi Philharmonic on the global music scene.
The Gyeonggi Philharmonic's Mahler Symphony No. 2 concert will be held at 8 p.m. on Thursday at Seoul Arts Center. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
The wheels are in motion on President Park Geun-hye's drive toward deregulation. Starting as early as May, it will no longer be illegal for individuals to renovate commercial trucks into food trucks. That opens the door for the operation of food truck services in the nation. The move comes only 5 days after the president pledged to cut the volume of regulations by 20% over the next 2 years. Well, for a closer look into these food trucks that have almost become a symbol of the Park administration's deregulation drive, we are joined live in the studio by Dr. Kim Byung-ju, the head of KLMP Consulting, and of course our regular commentator on this program. Good afternoon to you, Dr. Kim.
Good afternoon.
So these food trucks, so they have almost become a key symbol of President Park's deregulation drive.
Right.
Now, first of all, before we go any further, what are these food trucks?
Well, I thought I knew what they were talking about in the 7-hour televised discussion when they were talking about deregulation last week when the name food truck was mentioned. I mean, basically a vehicle, automobile, well, basically most trucks that have been kind of like modified to have a food vendor business being made available there. But the thing is, as time goes by, a lot of people seem to be a little bit confused about what this is all about, because in Korea we have so many different various kinds of food vendors, and often a lot of cases they're using carts rather than trucks. So I think there is a growing confusion. In the United States, for instance, we know exactly what food trucks look like. There are certain sizes usually, and often they carry the food that you cannot easily get in different restaurants. They only have a few very specialized food items, and white-collar workers often go there and get their lunch and stuff in big cities. But in Korea, we have various kinds, like in the Seoul case, like Sinchon areas, for instance. But the thing is, there are so many different other kinds, like coffee vendors that sometimes use carts, and hot dog, bungeoppang, all this kind of casual snacks. They sometimes use food trucks, but sometimes they use carts and stuff. So when they're talking about deregulation and government support for people to open this kind of business, what are they exactly talking about? I think there's a growing confusion about that.
Now, I think, I don't know, my understanding was that these are basically all mobile food vendors, but I don't know, I think there is really a growing confusion about that.
Right.
What are the key regulatory barriers to this business? Are they business registration or vehicle modification?
The particular regulation that they were talking about during the 7-hour televised address itself was about the modifying the vehicles, trucks basically. In Korea, as the law says at this point, it is illegal for individuals to change the design of trucks for different kind of purposes. You are supposed to just purchase a specially designed trucks or vehicles outright, and you cannot modify them as an individual. And that law, they're saying, needs to be changed now. And that was the main point of discussion, last week. And that's one thing. That's for like safety reasons. They're saying if individuals can change the vehicle designs, they can run into troubles because of the safety concerns and all that. But there is another issue that was not touched upon last week. I think was still very important. That is a business registration. A lot of these food vendors in Korea, they're not registered regular normal businesses. They're just doing their business without registration, meaning that sometimes many of these people can avoid the responsibility for paying taxes and stuff. So these are not listed business in the official registration, and so officially they don't exist, basically. So what is going to happen with the government support to encourage this kind of businesses? They are going to be registered and they'll start paying taxes and stuff. There will be another question, not only the safety, but also business registration, tax, and those issues are all outstanding right at this point.
Now, there are those of us who are in support of this, but of course, I'm sure that we sense some doubts and even opposition to the deregulation drive on this particular issue.
I wonder, frankly, individually, you support that idea for encouraging food trucks here in the city of Seoul as a citizen here, because a lot of people that I talk to are very much concerned about congested streets if these food trucks open their business on the roadside and blocking this traffic and causing even greater traffic problems. And even residential areas, a lot of citizens are concerned about having these kind of food trucks lined up on their alleys and stuff could actually undermine or compromise their overall quality of living. So since last week, we noticed a lot of concerns being raised by ordinary citizens. Some people are saying these food trucks have their cooking facility, which carries LPG gas tanks, and that could explode, they say. The safety, there is a concern about that. And also small and medium businesses that have these shops along the side of small streets and stuff, if these food trucks block them, they're saying, what happens to our business? They can block our business stream of customers coming in. And even some people who are concerned about the visual designs, if all these food trucks can have their own designs or even a very, very poor design, and that could actually undermine overall visual environment for the city and all that. So we just noticed growing concerns about this issue here.
Well, definitely something that we need to pay closer attention to before revising those laws. But what about public health concerns? I mean, will we see the same kind of the level of sanitary or health rules applied to these trucks as with restaurants?
I know what you're talking about, because what you're thinking about, at least, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, Korea's top hotels, their top restaurants were actually reported to have violated public health regulations. Some top restaurants in Korea Korea that in Seoul that we all know didn't keep their fan area that lets the air out, didn't keep it clean. So they were caught and they were fined and all that. So Korea, bottom line is Korea has a very tough public health regulations for these restaurants. Now the question is whether that kind of regulation will be applied to these mobile vendors or not. First of all, parents of the school children. About the children's snack and all that, sundae, tteokbokki, kimbap, and all that kind of stuff, they're very much concerned. They're saying we don't want to have this kind of food trucks lined up in front of our schools here, and we want to make sure, when our children eat these kind of food, we want to know where this food is coming from. Just like we know here in Korea, in regular restaurants, they have to identify the rule of the origin where this food is coming from. So there is all these concerns and worries being expressed. So this is just a great reminder how tough and tricky the deregulation issue is, and we will continue to run into this kind of cases in the future. So I think this was a good example to have just to get a taste of at this point.
Right, many more to come, I must say. And food trucks just happen to be one of the first in line to be in the hot seat.
Exactly.
All right, Dr. Kim Byung-ju, thank you so much for today. We will talk to you tomorrow.
Okay.
That's all from me at this hour. Thank you for watching. Join me again in less than 2 hours' time on Early Edition at 6.